The sky had turned a deep charcoal gray, heavy with clouds that threatened to burst at any moment. Clara pulled her tattered coat tighter around her thin frame as she walked back from the bakery where she worked part-time. The wind stung her face, and each drop of rain felt like tiny needles against her skin. By the time she reached the small wooden cabin she called home, her shoes were soaked through and her fingers numb. Clara had lived alone since her grandmother passed away last year. She had no parents. Her mother died giving birth, and her father was a mystery she never dared to pursue. Life had been a series of hardships, but Clara faced them all with a quiet, dignified strength. As she lit the fireplace and set a pot of soup on the stove, a frantic knock echoed through the cabin. Startled, she grabbed a rusted iron poker and approached the door. When she opened it, her heart skipped. Standing in the rain was a man in a torn coat, clutching a small boy who looked no older than 6. The child was shivering, cheeks red from the cold. "Please," the man said, his voice shaking more from desperation than the cold. "We've been walking for hours. My car broke down. We just need somewhere warm, just for the night." Clara hesitated, the logical voice in her head warning against letting strangers in. But her heart, the same heart that had known hunger and pain, overruled her. She stepped aside. "Come in," she said gently. The man introduced himself as Daniel, and his son's name was Noah. Clara noticed how Daniel's hands trembled as he helped his son out of the wet clothes and settled him near the fire. She offered them soup, the last bit she had, and they devoured it like they hadn't eaten in days. Daniel thanked her profusely, but Clara simply smiled and said, "No, one should be cold and hungry if I can help it." As Noah drifted off to sleep on a makeshift bed of blankets, Daniel sat back, exhausted. He looked around the modest cabin, its cracked walls and mismatched furniture, and said, "You live here alone?" Clara nodded. "Been on my own for a while now. It's not much, but it's home." Daniel studied her face. Kind eyes, tired, but still full of light. He wanted to tell her the truth then, that he wasn't just a drifter, that the car he mentioned wasn't broken. It was parked at the bottom of the hill, that he was, in fact, Daniel Rhodes, CEO of Rhodes Technologies, one of the fastest-growing companies in the country. But instead, he said nothing. He wanted to see how far her kindness would go, not for a test, but out of genuine curiosity. That night, Clara gave them her bed and slept on the floor, curled near the fire. And as Daniel lay there watching his son breathe peacefully, something inside him shifted. He had met many people in his life, powerful, wealthy, polished, but none had shown the grace and selflessness of this young woman who had nothing. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light over the frosted grass outside. Clara was already up, boiling water for tea. Noah sat at the small, wooden table, drawing with a stub of pencil she had found. Daniel stretched and walked over, unsure of how to express his gratitude. Clara waved off his thanks again and asked if he had someone to call. He said he did, and she offered him her phone. But what caught Daniel off guard wasn't the gesture. It was the way she smiled at Noah, like a big sister or a mother. It brought memories rushing back. His wife, Elise, who had passed away 2 years ago in a car accident. Since then, Daniel had thrown himself into his work, neglecting his emotions and distancing himself from people. Noah missed his mother terribly, and though Daniel did his best, he knew his son needed more than just a roof over his head. Watching Clara comfort Noah with just her presence, Daniel realized how starved both he and his son were for connection. The strange thing was, Clara never asked questions, never pried or looked at him like he was a burden. She listened when he shared small things, his love for photography, his dream of opening a tech school for kids. In return, she shared bits of her life too. Her grandmother's love for sunflowers, her dream of becoming a teacher, and how life kept getting in the way. There was a mutual healing taking place in that little cabin, silent but powerful. As the day wore on, Daniel knew he couldn't stay in the dark any longer. After making a few discreet calls while Clara was tending the garden, a black SUV pulled up quietly by the edge of the woods. Daniel stepped outside to speak with his assistant and made arrangements for something much bigger than just a ride home. When he returned, Clara was feeding Noah a slice of homemade bread. She looked up, and for a moment, Daniel saw something he hadn't seen in a long time: peace. That night, over a simple dinner, he finally told her, "Clara, I haven't been completely honest." She looked up, a little worried. "My name is Daniel Rhodes. I'm the CEO of Rhodes Technologies." The silence was long. Clara blinked, stunned. She opened her mouth but said nothing. "I didn't lie to trick you," he said quickly. I needed to know if someone could still be kind for no reason, without expecting anything." Clara finally smiled. "You didn't need to test me, Daniel. Being kind isn't something I do for reward. It's who I am." And for the first time in years, Daniel felt truly seen, not as a CEO or a wealthy man, but as a father, as a human being. The next morning, Daniel packed up to leave, but not without a different plan in mind. Clara walked him and Noah to the door, the little boy clinging to her side like he'd known her forever. Daniel knelt down and hugged his son, then looked up at Clara. "Come with us," he said suddenly. She blinked, confused. "What?" "To the city," he said. "I want to repay your kindness, not just with money or thanks, but with opportunity. I run a company that helps people with ideas, people like you. You said you wanted to be a teacher. Let me help you make that happen." Clara took a step back. "Daniel, He raised a hand gently. "You don't owe me anything. But maybe, just maybe, we need each other more than we think." Clara stared at the two of them, this stranger who had turned out to be someone entirely unexpected, and his sweet, motherless son who had stolen a piece of her heart. She looked around the small, empty cottage, so full of memories but too small for her dreams, and for the first time in years, she considered saying yes to something bigger than survival. "Just for a little while," she whispered. Daniel smiled. "Just for a start," he replied. City life was overwhelming at first. Clara had never seen buildings that touched the clouds or cars that glided silently across smooth highways. But Daniel had arranged everything. A cozy apartment close to his company headquarters, a part-time job as a teaching assistant at a local children's center, and a full scholarship to attend evening college classes to pursue her degree. Noah, too, had blossomed. He was happier, livelier, and more open, clinging to Clara with affection only a child who has found a mother figure could express. Daniel, watching from the side, felt something shift again. The grief that once consumed him now seemed to be healing in the warmth Clara brought. Slowly but surely, Clara became more than a guest in their lives. She was part of their daily rhythm. She helped Noah with his schoolwork, taught him how to cook, and stayed up late helping Daniel review pitches for philanthropic projects he wanted to fund. It was no longer about money. It was about impact. Clara's presence reminded Daniel of who he used to be before wealth clouded his view of humanity. And for Clara, each new day was a step toward the life she had only dared to dream of before. Months passed, and something remarkable began to happen. A story began to circulate, first in local blogs, then on national news. A young woman who, once had nothing, offered shelter to a stranger and his son, unaware he was one of the country's most powerful men. The story touched hearts around the world. Interviews were requested. Talk shows sent invitations. But Clara, ever humble, turned most of them down. "I didn't help Daniel for attention," she said softly. I helped because I know what it's like to be left in the cold. But Daniel saw an opportunity, not for publicity, but for good. Inspired by Clara's selflessness, he founded a new initiative called the Clara Project, aimed at identifying and empowering young people in underprivileged communities who showed potential but lacked resources. Clara became its co-director. She used her voice to lift others, her experience to mentor, and her compassion to connect. One afternoon, during a live televised event, Daniel introduced her to a crowd of thousands. She gave me shelter when I had everything, but felt like I had nothing. She reminded me of what matters most. As the audience stood to applaud, Clara's eyes welled up, not for herself, but for the girl she once was, who would have never believed she could make a difference. Years later, standing beneath the same oak tree where they first met on a cold, stormy night, Clara and Daniel held hands as Noah ran circles around them. Time had changed many things: fame, fortune, careers, but the heart of their story remained untouched. It had started with a knock on a stranger's door and led to a life full of purpose and love. Daniel had asked Clara to marry him not once, but twice. The first time she laughed and said, "You're insane." And the second time she whispered, "Only if Noah approves." Of course, Noah had screamed yes and hugged them both so tightly. They thought they'd burst. Their wedding was small, just close friends, the children Clara had helped, and a quiet garden filled with sunflowers in honor of her grandmother. As Daniel watched Clara walk down the aisle in a simple white dress with bare feet, he realized that life's greatest riches were never in his bank account, but in the courage of a poor girl who gave without expecting anything in return. Clara stood before him, not as someone rescued, but as someone who had rescued him. And as they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, not even Noah's. Their story became a legend in its own right, a reminder that kindness has power, and that one act of compassion can ripple through lives in ways no one could ever predict.